Oh, I don't have questions.
You don't have questions? That's okay. We're already live.
This is Producing Music Podcast with Mark Dollar and Cooper Anderson.
Deer in the headlights. Deer in the headlights.
Deer in the headlights.
This is
Producing Music Podcast with Cooper Anderson, Mark Dollar. We're here today. We might be a little unprepared, but we'll make it fun for you guys. As crazy as it is, I actually had a good time listening to New Music Friday. Really good time. I listened to the entire playlist, unlike I have ever done before, Cooper.
I listened to it. I always listen to it all. I preferred last week's a little better personally, but there's some good entries this week.
I personally felt like this week's playlist felt really good, like really, really good. I don't know. I just felt like there were better ideas. I don't know. I'll get more into it as we go. But how do you wrap up this week's New Music Friday? What were some of your favorite songs? What do you think were some of the worst songs? And, what's your message to some of the producers that you hear out there based on this playlist listen?
Well, there was a lot of hip hop, which is cool, but it's not really my thing. So I don't really comment on that.
Oh my God, hip hop is not really your thing. Come on.
I know. All my credits are hip hop, but it's not really my thing. It's whatever.
Oddly enough, that's the same with me.
Yeah. So so it was there was a lot of EDM, which is more my thing. So the number one song was Ariana Grande and Lady Gaga. I'm just not a big fan of Lady Gaga's voice. It's just like a personal thing. I mean, she's super talented and everything. It's just not really my cup of tea. But yeah, I mean, the song was cool. Song was cool and everything. I didn't save any until I got to Carly Rae Jepsen. That was the first one I actually saved. That was pretty good. Noteworthy ones that I really wanted to talk about was the main one was Florida Georgia Line, actually.
Really?
And
you like that song?
I mean, it's again, it's not really my thing. But the reason I want to talk about it is I love the packaging. I love the rollout. So the song is called Beer 30. And it's part of an EP that's called Six Pack. And they've been dripping out singles because there was some singles that were, have been out for a few weeks now. And like each one, the cover had, a beer. And they just do clever things with their lyrics and their titles too. So like Beer 30, like the six pack is like the six pack of beer, but it's also 6 songs on the EP. And like the first single that I noticed anyway, I haven't super dived into the research, but the first one I saw was I Love My Country. Like I love my country, but I also love country, like I love my country music. Clever double entendres like that I think are really cool. And then I have to shout out, I'm almost done actually. I wouldn't want to spend too much time. But so I have to shout out my own song, DJ Fun Size Handle Me, just came out.
Awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And then our good friend Evangelia just dropped her record. She's on Columbia, Germany. And her song's called Pame Pame. It's like a Greek thing. She's Greek, so they're really pushing the Greek heritage. It's a really cool record.
Friggin' sweet. That's awesome. Yeah, the Florida Georgia Line thing, I didn't do any research on that, but yeah, I guess in terms of the marketing, that's cool. But Beer 30, I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was cool, for the context now that there's more context provided. But being an unsuspecting listener, I didn't know if I could get behind it all the way. Um, Anything else you want to add to your new Music Friday wrap up?
No, that's basically it.
Cool. Well, let me go on ahead. I'm going to just talk about some things on my new Music Friday wrap up. First of all, I really loved the 1975 song Tonight I Wish I Was With You. That to me was awesome. It felt good. Really great way to start off a playlist too. I guess if you're gonna start off a playlist right, you might as well start it off with something that feels as good as that. I really could not turn the song off just because it feels so good. The intro was well thought out. All the production elements is really cool. I love the choices of drum samples and the choice to do live drums. It feels so good and it sounds great too. Great sample selection there if there were any samples involved. Lady Gaga and Ariana Grande, I thought there was like a really cool guitar phaser automation going on in the song. I thought that was really awesome. But other than that, I just thought it was like a conventional house song that is cool to its degree. I love that it's sticking to a like a kind of scene. There are tons of other mentionables in terms of what's on this playlist. There is actually a Nick Jonas song that's out called Until We Meet Again. We have a friend named Phil Silverberg. I think this is the most Phil Silverberg sounding song on this playlist. But you should check it out. I guarantee you'll think this sounds like Phil. But the some other songs. Snoop Dogg actually wrote one of the coolest songs about the quarantine. And it sounds cool. It sounds retro. It sounds Cali. It sounds bright. I love listening to it. I practically had it on repeat just before we started this podcast today. There was a really cool country song that I did hear called Church in a Chevy by a guy named Jordan Davis.
Hmm.
He was pretty dope. That felt pretty good. The production and the lyricism was pretty dope. IDK, ASAP Ferg with a Mazel Tov. There's a, a new song by Styles P and um, it's called Animals, and it's just like sick old school hip hop if you're fans of that. I mean, there's so many notables. One or two other notables I'll mention. Frito Bang. For me, that was one of the songs called Top, I believe. That was one of the coolest, freshest trap sounds on the new music playlist so far. And Park Hyjin with a song called Like This is super infectious, kind of in the same vein in terms of my feelings about the 1975. Um,
That was like the
just so-
K-pop one, right?
yeah, I loved it, man. It
Yeah.
was so cool. It was just chill, it was fun, just just super hype. I loved it.
Yeah, that was a good
I
record. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. I dug that all the way. I would like to wrap up this new music playlist by saying, cool is a context and not the other way around. What do I mean by that? I'm meaning that I'm hearing as many cool songs as I heard on this playlist. There were just as many songs that I felt like were just safe in terms
Mm.
of, I feel like these producers in particular, or these writers, kind of all involved here, are just hitting off these like checklists. It's like, my lyrics have to feel like this, and I have to use tons of reverb this, and I have to use all these automations and all this and all that. And it's like, Yeah, that's all cool, but there's context to those things. So let me kind of, unravel some things with some statements that I at least want to make known to people out there. Um, but firstly, how I think that we're just kind of looking at too much of a, how we're, like, for instance, all the, like, the mixing tutorials, the production tutorials. I feel like people are watching this stuff way too much and trying to make records based on how these productions that they have learned about came across, where in our day there was no mixing tutorial, there was no how to, you just had to make a record sound great. So how do
Yeah.
you go about making a record sound great as opposed to how people tell you to make a record sound great? I mean, again, applying things to context, and these are these statements that I want to make. Um, just because your um, vocal is doused in reverb doesn't mean your vocal sounds great. I think that's something that I don't know if you can agree upon, but for me, it's like, you know, some people just think, okay, I need to just put my vocal in this like cavernous reverb space, and then I'm gonna have a really cool song, or I'm gonna be like as modern sounding as everyone else. And I just think that's such a myth. The second thing is, that dry is sterile. Dry can be used as a context in the song just like anything else can. Like, you can have a verse that's completely dry and then explode the chorus with tons of reverb and stuff like that. Or you can use a shorter reverb in a verse to go really long in a chorus, or maybe really long in a bridge. Um, all of these things are context, and it's how you can invite the listener to understand the depth in your mix. But again, we shouldn't just be doing these things just because someone else said, "Hey, you have to do this." No, that's not the way production should go. So please, just think about how your productions are separate from other people's productions, and what makes your production sound good. Um,
Yeah, so
and
before you go too much further on that, I wanted to say, I can't 100% blame the producers here because while you're right, a lot of these songs are very formulaic, but also this is a curated playlist. So, like, how much of that is the curators picking those songs that fit that formula? You know what I mean?
I hear you, but I'm not necessarily talking about the curation standpoint. I'm talking about just production. This is not necessarily how the curator kind of viewed this. I'm just looking at the playlist in whole, and what songs that I felt, kind of stood out in the masses here. Um, you know, I just feel like the pop industry is like a kill or be killed industry, and you and I are still alive. So apparently, we've done some killing in the past. You know what I'm saying? It's like we can't sit here and just play safe whatever we do. Like, I mean, yeah, of course, we have a curator that's selecting these songs based on whether or not they need to select these songs. We don't know. However, I mean, I think there's a big part of that as well. Payola still exists in 2020. Uh, but what I'm trying to say is that no matter what, if you're landing on a New Music Friday playlist, if you're landing on some other playlist or some radio station, you always have to make the most bang out record that you can. And again, it's about concept. Like, for instance, there's this Gemini record, Jermaine. It's called What's Going On. He goes on to this like old school 90s approach, and his whole vocal cadence is dedicated to how he's going about that song. Does he actually sing that way each and every song? No. But is he singing that song for a specific kind of cadence so he can match the vibe of the song? Absolutely. And I personally feel like we need more artists cognizant of those things.
Right, right. Yeah, it's more about the vibe than like checking off the boxes. Like these aren't, homework assignments.
Yeah, that's a good term for it. I feel like, some of these songs just fall into, okay, yeah, you made a good production. Yay. Like that's
Yeah.
not what gets us, and that's not what makes us producers at the finest level,
Well, to be
you know.
fair, I mean the production is really the first thing that catches my ear though, because when I'm listening to this playlist, I'm not listening to the entire 3 minutes of each song. I'm listening to like 3 seconds of each song. And if I like the vibe, like, because before I was saying like all the hip hop stuff is not really my thing. So if I hear a beat and N word, which is, 90% of the time, that's what I hear, I'll just clip it because it's not, I mean, there was a couple hip
Not
hop songs that I liked, I liked the beat or whatever. I listened to, maybe 15, 30 seconds, whatever. But yeah, I'm looking for like more the EDM, like, that sort of thing, because that's what I enjoy.
Yeah. Check out the Frito Bang song. Again, it falls into context. Again, this is another trap song, but you got to listen to how Frito, I'm guessing, is using his vocal cadence to really fit into the song, as well as the choice of guitar sample. Another thing that I could say to what you just said is, for instance, every one of these songs has an intro part. Every one of them, every single one of them starts the song off in some just way that just tries to set off a vibe. And I think that for some of these songs was actually a big mistake. Um, Trying to always have to go by those same standards of pop arrangement doesn't always suit the song.
Hmm.
That's one of the things that made the 1975 song infectious to me, is that they actually spent time working on an intro,
Hmm.
as opposed to just, okay, we got this little intro with all these little vocal chops and all this dumb shit.
Yeah. Take the
And now all of a
pads and
sudden,
throw the vocal chops over with no drums for 4 bars, and that's your
exactly,
intro.
exactly. That I've heard that in so many stances. And, you, after a while, when you hear it in that context, okay, here's the song's intro, it's like you already know where it's going. And you already, once you hear that vocal, there's no other instrument. Like, there's 9 times out of 10, there's nothing else that's going to happen besides just that intro, some extra drums, and just how that vocal presents itself. And that's it. Um, I don't know. I just feel like there could be more risque attempts at arrangement, maybe more so. So that's what I'm kind of wrapping up with. Better arrangement and better context.
Oh
Again,
no,
we
I gotta put my battery back on.
better context. I don't know what happened. Cooper dropped again. Um, but yeah, this is wrapping up the New Music Friday playlist. Waiting for Cooper to get back on. I'll go ahead and talk about some more songs, and I'm just going to talk about context. Why not? Again, it's just more so about how these things work. How are you making, like, for instance, there's a good deal of songs on the playlists that, has the 80s vibe. It's like, okay, as a producer, you have to think about those things. You have to think about, oh man, like there are 90 other producers doing 80s vibe songs. Double, times a million that. And you have even more of that. And that's what I'm saying. You can't just make an 80s song anymore. You have to make an 80s song with a purpose. So you have to think about, okay, what part of my production do I want to be an 80s kind of song? or what part of my production do I don't want to be an 80s style song? You know, those are the things, are the ideas that kind of strike me as a listener for sure.
Yeah.
Are you back, Cooper?
I'm back. Yeah, sorry, I missed most of that. The one other thing I wanted to add, though, is the other one that did catch me, I forgot, was the G-Eazy record, just because, you know, when I think G-Eazy, I'm thinking like, you know, another hip hop beat, but the record was like more, you know, the hipster bedroom pop type thing. There wasn't any rap on it. It was like singing and, you know, ambient guitars and stuff. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool song too. I thought it got a little too bedroomy at times, but for sure, I thought it was really cool. There's a few other songs that again had context. Again, like for instance, Styles P coming out with some old school hard like concept hip hop is awesome. In this time, that was great. He had that wide lane open because no one's trying to do that. Everybody's trying to hit him hard with like a trap acoustic
Right.
guitar sample. You know what I'm saying? Like he went back with that and that felt good. Same thing with Snoop Dogg. It's like instead of him sitting there talking about quarantine, he just talked about wanting to be outside and made it such a feel good song. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me was just like, yeah, I love stuff like that. There was another song I want you to check out on the playlist. It's by, I guess, a band or artist called Frugal, called Flow Now. And again, just a great concept all around. Again, these are concepts that once you figure out what the concept is, then you'll figure out how many tools you have to pull that all together. And that's what makes it cool. Not the fact that you just have the instruments. So don't think about it from the checkpoint stand list. Think about it from what your song needs.
Yeah,
All
totally.
right.
So let's
All
move
right.
on. You know, we got basically, you know, there's the current event, and then after that, I wanted to talk about some other stuff. But look, the main current event news for this week is the Spotify's acquisition of the Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so that's kind of huge because they paid $100 million for exclusive rights to Joe Rogan, and that's pretty major because for a number of reasons. I mean, Spotify's been investing heavily in podcasts. They've been trying to find their niche, and podcasts is like one of the fastest growing you know, media formats. I think maybe the COVID pandemic is kind of slowing it down a little bit because I think a lot of people were listening, you know, in their commute, but in general, it's still growing pretty big. And then what that means is also, since it's exclusive, that means it's going to come off of Apple, YouTube, everything else. It's going to get pulled down, and Spotify is going to develop a video platform for their app to you know, to be able to get the full experience. And since it's a 3-hour podcast, you're going to have lots of opportunities for licensing because they play songs and stuff on there.
Wow. That's
So
awesome.
I think it's really cool. And then remember a couple years ago, you know, Spotify was trying to sign artists directly, and then the labels freaked out, and then they kind of backed off of that. But now that they're moving into podcasts and they're getting all this licensing, they may have more leverage to sign other things. And then the competitors, YouTube, Apple, Amazon, they're going to be looking for stuff to sign too, podcasts and whatnot. I mean, it's going to be podcasts for a while, but I think eventually it's going to move into big artists, and, you know, we'll see. It's just definitely a very interesting event.
Well, Joe Rogan's podcast is single-handedly one of the biggest podcasts in the world. He has so many different listeners. He has so many different perspectives on that show. He's not necessarily favored in some communities, I think a lot of respect goes out to him just because he invites such an open format, just for people to kind of spread their ideas. And right now, it's at the foremost that I think it's ever been. So, and I think in this particular time, it's super important that there's somebody like a Joe Rogan, who is like essentially become his own style of media source. And podcasting, in a way, has become a sufficient news and media source for some niche people. So I think there's a good reason for that. I'm not necessarily sure how that can work for artists. I do see the licensing ideas in it. I think you're right in that. I think we're going to see more of that, but I'm not necessarily sure how bigger artists will integrate with that, catalogs and all of that stuff. That was one of Taylor Swift's loopholes, when she started kind of combating Big Machine and stuff like that. So that was like, and there was also the the Apple work, so to speak, where she was just basically trying to create some extra media for herself. Um, I don't know how I say about that, but again, that was just an example of how Spotify can create certain loopholes for those types of artists.
Well,
Although
that's the difference between someone who controls their content and someone who doesn't. I mean, Joe Rogan, since he controlled all his content, he was able to take a deal like that. And then the reason why Taylor Swift is like running around, like, trying to stop, shut down all the stuff Big Machine is doing, and then also get in the stuff that she's doing, her new stuff, is because she didn't control that content. The label did.
Of course. So, and that's what I'm saying, further proving that it was her opportunity to get on Spotify and maybe like re-release some of the records that she had done in past to be able to create her own royalties.
Oh, right. Yeah, because she was anti-streaming for the longest time.
Yeah, exactly.
But now it's actually making money, so now she's on there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll see what it looks like. I love Spotify. I love the platform of it, and I think they're just trying to increase their ways that they can reach the world today.
Yeah. Speaking of that, subscribe to our podcast, like this on YouTube, follow us on Spotify. We're on Apple.
Yes.
Until someone gives us 100 million, we're going to be everywhere.
Yes, we're going to be everywhere.com, everybody. I don't know if that's an actual URL, but.
So let's move on. The last thing I wanted to discuss, so this is the end. This is going to be the end of the podcast portion. And then for Twitch and YouTube, we're going to keep going and do a little, production tutorial. But for the end of the podcast portion, I just wanted to say that we have a few things in the works. Probably for next week, we're going to be starting to do giveaways, and that was the main thing, right? Giveaways.
Yeah, some giveaways. We're going to be talking about some of the new products that we have, some of the sample packs. We're also going to be talking about some of the new productions that we're working on as well. There's always tons of things in the works between myself and Cooper Anderson. And so we will be in an updating mode very soon.
Yeah, and like I said, we're changing the format a little, so the Twitch and YouTube versions are going to be the extended version of the podcast with this additional content. It's mostly because those are visual formats, and this stuff I'm like, we're going to be showing you stuff on the screen, so we can't really do that effectively on the audio only. But anyway, like I said before, like, subscribe, tune in next week. We'll be back with more New Music Friday commentary and current events and giveaways.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So, moving right along. Let me change my scene here. All right. Now we have our computer screen. It's going to look the same for you, Mark, on the Zoom call, but basically you can see my screen now on Twitch. So Yeah, okay, so we just wanted to go through my production template. I'm actually using it to record my audio right now, so that's why you're seeing a little bit of the record track on the far left. But so this is how I start a session. It'll, I'll just import the tracks up on the top, and then I'll import session data and get all of these reverb returns and mix bus, subgroups and whatnot. So basically the first several tracks are a bunch of reverbs and delays. I think I have 14 on there. So my first one's a Lexicon Hall. Oh, and all of these I just have the Slate virtual channel, because I do like those little virtual channels, the Slate one and the Plugin Alliance. I think they just add a little cool character. It's very subtle, so it's not really necessary. But then I have the Lexicon Hall, Ginormous Halls. It's like a big, massive hall reverb. That's one of my favorites.
I love Ginormous.
Yeah, every time I turn this one on, when you're in the booth, you love it. So it's a classic.
Oh,
yeah. Then the next is the Lexicon Room. So that's just like a room, a short reverb. Then I have Abbey Road's Plate by Waves.
I love that one. That's a really cool one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like a dirty plate sound. It's definitely unique as far as plates go. It's a little different from all the others. So for me, it's kind of like a hit or miss. It's like really amazing or really doesn't work. Then I have 3 delays. I have 2 Echo Boys. I have the 8th note on the telephone setting. Then I have a quarter note on the Echoplex setting. Sometimes I'll do space echo, whatever. It's just slightly different filters, basically, and modulation. And then I got the D16 repeater for a half note, just to change the algorithm, so I'm not 100% Echo Boy. Echo Boy is by far my favorite, but I like to change the sounds up a little bit. Then I have these are my UAD reverbs. They're all disabled by default. Let's see, let me get my keyboard over here. They're all disabled. Yeah, because they take a lot of DSP, so I'm actually gonna enable these if it will let me. Oh, it probably won't let me because I'm recording, but basically I have the Ocean Way Room reverb. I got the Pure Plate, which is a more traditional sounding plate. This one's really lush and clear. I got the Lex 480. I think it's on a hall setting. Another hall. It's like a different vibe from the original, the Lexicon PCM native. So that's the UAD Lex 480L. So this is a little more vintage, because the 480L is from the 80s, right? 80s or 90s. And then UAD Capital Chambers is my favorite by far chamber reverb. Very high quality, very lush, dense reverb. It's good for short chambers or long chambers. You can move the mics around. They have little animations. It looks cool. Then I got Soundtoys Little Plate. This is another one of my favorite plates. This one is kind of halfway in between the Pure Plate and the Abbey Road, where it's like, it's a little more dirtier, but it's not, it's kind of got a different vibe from the Abbey Road. So I definitely keep this one on there.
Different.
Yeah. There's a few other plates I have too. I just don't keep them on my template. I usually, there's just so many. I really had to narrow it down, but I do enjoy the Arturia. Has a really nice plate, and there's another one that I use. I forget. Here, I can't change plugins. That's all right. Yeah, the Arturia, and I think Native Instruments has a plate that's really nice. Then I got Valhalla Room. This classic. I mean, Valhalla stuff is this is pretty much industry standard because it's cheap and it sounds good. And ironically, people think it sounds expensive, even though it's like one of the least expensive plugins. It's $50, never goes on sale. Now that I've got this one, I have Valhalla Room and Valhalla Shimmer, and plus they have 3 free ones. They just came out with a new free one.
Super massive. And
Super
I just
massive.
used it.
Yeah,
It's
how do you like
awesome.
it? I installed it. I haven't tried it yet. It's really good.
Yeah, I actually used it on, I forget, it was like a test mix I was doing for a band this week. And yeah, it was incredible. It's just nice and long. The Gemini preset, which is the default preset, is really good.
Nice. Just typing something on the chat here. Yeah, so Valhalla, they have the Vintage Room Reverb, or no, Valhalla Vintage Verb or something like that. That's the one that
Yeah.
came out after Room. So when I originally got it, I got Room and I got Shimmer. And then I just, I've almost bought the other one so many times, but then I'm just like, I have so many reverbs, I can't, I can't keep up with this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And then my newest one, is the Exponential Audio Phoenix Verb. I got this for $10. It was like a no-brainer. So Exponential Audio is created by the guy who designed the Lexicon PCM native reverb plugins. I believe he also worked for Lexicon on their hardware units as well. And then he started his own company, Exponential Audio, which just last year got picked up by Isotope. And so that means now they can sell his plugins for cheap and take a loss, and everybody wins, I guess. But anyway, this sounds really good. It's like, I mean, the thing that really differentiates reverbs for me is like the lushness. Like, for instance, if you pull up Deverb, it's like, it sounds cool, but you can hear like these little echoey delay things. And to me, that doesn't sound, that sounds like 8-bit basically. My
Yeah, it
ears
sounds
are,
a little canny.
yeah, something like that. So like the Lexicon and the, all these other ones that I have on here, just whatever they're doing, they kind of smooth that out. So it's just like a really like thick and full sound, even on the short reverbs too. And that's kind of what I'm looking for in a reverb. And then I'll just use, either filters or change the time to make stuff sit in my mix the way I want it to. I put plugins after these if I need to. Okay, so that's the reverbs and delays. So those are all feeding into this FX bus. So then basically what I'm doing is I have 8 subgroups, which are all running on the CLA Mix Hub. So the CLA Mix Hub is like basically an SSL channel, but it also has this bucket view, and you can have subgroups within it. And then, so you can control up to 64 of these. I actually only use 8, but the reason I like this is because when I'm on this view, now I can control all 8 of my subgroups on one screen. And that's kind of the concept, is like, oh, you can do the whole mix within this one plugin. I don't get that crazy with it because it takes a while to set up, but on my template, this works out really well. And then you can change the view too. You can have all of your EQs, all your dynamics. And this is probably the view I use most, is the output levels. So if I need to just adjust a level real quick, this is a good place to do it. The reason I would do it here as opposed to right on the fader is in case I have automation on the fader, this will effectively act as like a trim to that, so it won't change the automation. And then the CLA Mix Hub is one of my favorite SSL channels because it has this thing where you can flip the mic input. So that basically means you're running a line level signal into the mic input. So it has this saturation. And there's not many SSL plugins that do it. This is one of the few. And also you can move these modules around too. You can switch the order and whatnot. You can put an insert. It's only Waves plugins, but I often will throw like a Smack Attack in here or like another compressor or something. And then the other cool thing is on the compressor, you can switch it to Bluey, which is their CLA 76 plugin. It's an 1176 type plugin instead of a SSL channel compressor, which I usually end up using. for
I
whatever
actually
reason.
I love using that one a lot because I can actually get 2-1 as opposed to always going 4-1 on the CLA 76.
Oh, you mean on the Bluey here?
Well, yeah, on the Bluey, yeah.
Okay, so basically what I'm doing in regards to the way I set up my session, so I'll import all the tracks and then I'll bust them into these 8 subgroups. So I have kick, snare, drums, so that's like all the other drums. I got bass, instruments, lead vocal, background vocal, and FX. And then the kick and the lead vocal are mono. And the reason I have that like that is because I'm running out through my SSL6 for analog summing. So after everything gets run into these subgroups, then it's outputted to the SSL6. And then that comes back in here on A5 and 6. So it's it's summed into the subgroups, and then the subgroups go out for additional analog summing and processing. There's a couple more little plugins I want to go over. So I have the reason I have the bass separate here is because this is a great place to like sidechain your bass, sidechain compress. If I want to pump a bass, I can just throw a compressor on here and sidechain it to the kick. And I can sidechain it to the kick bus, so it'll be any kick that's playing, not just one particular kick. And then the instruments, I can actually do that with the instruments too if I want. But I have this auto key. Oh, I guess I'm speaking in C minor today. But auto key is on the instruments, so when I'm like doing a vocal session, this is a quick way to figure out the key, and then you can actually send to auto tune. So I'll have like auto tune on the vocals, and this will blast the key out to it, and it'll adjust all those plugins. And then on my lead vocal and background vocal, I have the UAD Oxford suppressor, which is my favorite de-esser plugin, but it's on my UAD card, so I only have limited number of instances. So that's why I have it on the subgroup instead of on individual channels. But that one's a really cool for like fine tuning specific frequencies. The display is really nice, and I'm a big fan of the Oxford stuff in general.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Okay, so we're going through the subgroups. It's going out into the SSL6. There's a little bit of additional processing on there. I have a little bit of EQ on the kick and the lead vocal, and then everything goes into the mix bus, which has the mix bus insert of my GML 8200 EQ. And I keep it just kind of pretty static, basically the same setting. And then the way I'll work with that is I'll adjust EQ going into it. You know what I mean? Instead of switching the actual analog EQ, that way I don't have to like worry about recalls so much.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'll use a plugin to kind of compensate going into it or whatever. And then
that makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I had the 6 has a bus compressor as well, but I don't really use that. It's not I don't know. I mean, it's good, but it's just not really
Kind of noisy.
my vibe. Well, that's the Listen mic compressor is super noisy.
Well, that I found that the 6.2 bus is a little noisy as well, just a little bit.
Well, the actual bus itself is noisy. I mean, that's kind of why you use analog stuff, is for the noise that it imparts. It kind of, masks things.
Yeah, I found that, like something on a real SSL bus is a lot smoother sounding than, that particular one.
My main other experience is with the AWS 900, and that one is as noisy or noisier than the 6, I would say.
Yeah, I used 9000K growing up. So that one was a little bit cleaner than most. I think that's another reason why people like the G a little bit more.
I mean, basically the way to compensate for that is to give solid levels going in. If you have all of your levels towards the top of the headroom in the console, then you're going to use the most of the dynamic range, and then you'll have the least amount of audible noise because most of your signal is, close to the top of that dynamic range. But anyway, so then I'm coming back in A5 and 6 so this is the SSL mix bus returning back in. And then I hit the Slate Virtual Console mix bus. I have it on the Neve setting because I've found that this one it does something cool with the bass that I really like. And also the main thing I use here is I'll use this input to like lower the level. So this is where I adjust my gain, basically going into my mastering chain. So that's super handy to have right at the beginning of the chain. And then I have the Waves linear phase low band. So I'm just cutting everything below 32 because that stuff doesn't really add anything to your mix.
Yeah,
and it
it's
just
a bunch of rumble.
Yeah, it just makes your speakers work unnecessarily for inaudible frequencies. So I cut everything there with a high quality linear phase EQ. And then I have the Manley Varimu, the UAD Manley Varimu. I'm actually going to open this. I'm going to stop my recording and start it again real quick so I can show you this.
The whole thing.
Okay, so now my thing is coming way louder. It's weird. Anyway, so yeah, so the UAD Varimu is my main mix bus compressor. I'm using that. I guess I have it 100% wet now. Is that right? Is that the right setting? Yeah, so this, I'm just kind of riding the compression and I adjust the threshold. Sorry, I got this weird echo now that I turned that back on. So anyway, so I'm riding the compression level with that first thing that I showed you, the input knob on the Slate VCC. Then I got another Shadow Hills compressor. This one I actually don't really end up using that much. It's sometimes I'll throw it on for like a different flavor, but typically I'm just using the Varimu and this SPL Iron. Those are my two favorites. So I have the Varimu in mid-side mode and the Iron is in LR mode. So I'm doing a mid-side compression as well as a left-right compression. Then I have this Lindell channel. It's just basically another gain stage similar to the Slate one. Then I have an additional compressor, this PSP Master Comp. It has this really cool fat setting that I like. But this one I'll use only occasionally as well. Same thing with the Shadow Hills. Then I got the J37 tape by Waves, just for some tape saturation. Then I've got the Brainworks BX Digital V3 for some mid-side EQ, and mostly what I'm doing here is boosting the stereo width, but it's also a place to just throw on some additional EQ if I need to cut or boost a certain frequency at this point in the chain. Then, excuse me, my black box, I'll add some saturation to the mix, and then I have the Dangerous Mix Bus EQ. So this is kind of like a bass and treble, like a tone control type EQ. It's very cool for bringing out the super lows and the super highs. Then we got the Ozone. So I'm basically using the Master Assistant on this, which kind of like auto masters your track. It's really cool. And it gets all the levels kind of right, and it'll give an EQ setting as well, and you can tweak it even more. Then I have T-Rex Suite. I'm using the Master Match on this occasionally. Like if someone tells me, oh, I want my song to sound like this song, then I'll throw it in the Master Match and just get like a cool EQ curve or whatever. But usually I'm not using that. And then the Slate FGX is like my final limiter, and I have the dither on here, so we're dithering down to 16 bits. So that's like what bounces out. And then after that, I have some utility plugins. I have the Adaptive AB adapter. Adapter audio. So this is like for ABing with references, and it's got these really cool readouts, so I can kind of compare two sources very quickly and easily.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite plugins. It's really cool. Then I have the Listen To, which is what I use for my remote sessions. So this like broadcasts out from this point in my chain out to whatever link I send, and I have it after the adapter so I can hear like the references and whatnot. Actually, hold on one second. I'll be right back. One moment.
Producing Music Podcast. For coming back. I just realized that me and Cooper have blue rooms. We both have blue rooms. Kind of awesome. Yeah. The bulldog.
Sorry about that. I had to hit the bathroom. Okay, so the Listen To, that's for the production sessions. Then I have SPL Hawkeye, which is a metering program. This is really deep. It's great to identify your levels and like your frequencies. It even has this bit depth thing, which is really cool, and stereo correlation. Then I have this loudness penalty, which kind of tells you what the streaming services are going to do to your master. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet, I guess. And then the last one is Isotope Insight, which is, similar to Hawkeye. It's just kind of a different, it's an older metering plugin. So, but I do like this 3D spectrogram. It's Hawkeye has one as well, but I think this one looks cooler. This is the older version of Insight as well. They have a new update, but I've been mostly using Hawkeye for now. And then these other ones on the other side don't really get used. This is like my backups. Like if I need a different bus compressor, I'll do the API, or like I have the SPL passive EQ, a different limiter, some older plugins basically. But the other one that's always on, this is the last one we're going to discuss, is this Hoffa Project Time. So this is a free plugin. I recommend everyone do this. I had it on pause just now, but it's just a timer. So basically whenever the session is open and this is not paused, you're on the clock. So it's very cool for like keeping track of how much time you're actually spending doing your sessions. So when I have a client who's like doing 4,000 revisions, then I'll know that, if I've spent 20 hours and they're paying me $100, then I've made like $5 an hour. And if I've spent 20 minutes and they're giving me $100, then I've made like 300 an hour. So it's kind of like, just break it down that way. And also then you have a little reference you can show people, like, look, I spent, you paid me for 5 hours, but I spent 15. Here's the proof. It's kind of a little guideline. All right, I'm going to pause this so I can get off this echo and put my headphones back on.
Cool. Slip.
All right, there we go.
Cool.
There we go.
All right. So that pretty much, yeah. I mean, I love how you have so many different options for it, just kind of already laid out. For me, I have been trying to keep my mix bus super simple and just kind of working on the individual elements. But I love how you have the utility plugin set up. That's actually a really cool idea. Might want to invite that in my own template. So yeah, learn from Cooper Anderson every day, people.
Yeah, and everything's bypassed that I'm not using, so it's not dinging my DSP or anything like that.
Word.
That's kind of the key. And then you can have stuff just ready to go, because when you have a lot of plugins, you don't want to be fiddling through the list every single time. But yeah, next week we'll check out your template.
Yeah, I would love to show you guys my template. It's verydeep.com.
Awesome.
Cool. So yeah. All right. Well, all right. Producing Music Podcast. Check us out. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram.
Twitcher.
Twitcher. The Twitcher.
Twitcher.
Producing Music. The producingmusicpodcast.com. Cooper Anderson, Mark Dollar. We are out. Thank you guys for watching.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.